Hello, my name is Terry Grantling. I'm a student at Liberty University. This course is HSCO 508, and this is my final interpersonal communication project. Within this course, there were 4 books that were very instrumental to me understanding how to assess my communication skills. The first book is Bridges Not Walls by Stewart. The second book was How to Solve the People Puzzle by Carbonell. The third book, Listening, the Forgotten Skill by Burley Allen. And one of my favorites, and one that I know I will implement as much as possible, is Why Don't We Listen Better by Peterson. Next slide. Within this project, interpersonal communication project that is, I'll give a definition of interpersonal communication, overarching goals, description of my personal background, how behavioral blends affect us, and how it affected me personally, the negative and the positives, communication barriers, resources and strategies, my action plan, and my conclusion. Next slide. First, I want to give you guys the definition of interpersonal communication according to Stewart. Interpersonal communication is the type of communication that happens when people involved talk and listen in ways that maximize the presence of personal. When you are communicating with family, friends, and coworkers, there were several things that I did not know should take place. Through this course, I learned how I can be a better listener, how I could be a better communicator, and not having biased thoughts while communicating, and not always feeling like I have to give my opinion. Next slide. What is communication? I thought I knew what communication was before this course, but I really understand how my verbal and nonverbal communication skills affects others, how the dialogue that I have with my coworkers and family and friends, how it truly affects them. And according to Stewart, communication is the exchange of feelings, information, and meaning through verbal and nonverbal messages. I can remember an instance when I was giving a lot of nonverbal communication to a coworker that I disagreed with. And even though I didn't say a word, she walked away very offended. And so with that, I really incorporated some of what Stewart said, well, most of what he said, about communication exchanges and how important they are when we're communicating with others. The goal of communication, when you're communicating, what is the goal of the dialogue? So, according to Stewart, the goal of communication is dialogue in which one person speaks and the other listens. And so if the other person, one person speaks and the listener replies in such a way to acknowledge the conversation, as well take it a step further. And so in Peterson's book, I learned about taking it a step further. Some of the things that I could do to let others know that I am thoroughly listening to them. And so those are some tools and strategies that I'll talk about today. Next slide. I had to sit and think about my goal when communicating with others. And so Stewart used an analogy of breathing in and out. It sounded really, really crazy to me, but when I thought about it, communication should be that simple, but it's not. And so Stuart gave us an example of inhaling is receiving a message communicated by the sender. And then exhaling is sending your message to the other person. According to Stuart, a higher level of trust and freedom can be established if we focus on inhaling. So, inhaling within communication is the part where you receive the message. So, being a listener is so critical. That's one of the things that I learned through this course is that not only is being an effective communicator, but the listener plays a key part in communication. Next slide. My overarching goals. So my overarching goals were to make will be to make meaningful connections with others, so that they feel valued. It's sort of like when I tell my children to treat others like you want to be treated. So if I'm communicating with others, I most definitely want them to listen and to feel valued when they are speaking with me. I want to become a level 1 listener. I know that it's going to take some work, and I'm willing to put that work in. I want to give feedback when communicating, and that requires paraphrasing, restating what was said to me, not my perception, but what exactly was said. And then I was shocked when it said to take notes. That's something that I do often, and why not do it when I am communicating with others? And finally, to listen with a non-judgmental and empathetic space. That really hits me because when I'm communicating with someone that I have conflict with, I had to ask myself, am I empathetic? Do I approach that conversation non-judgmental? Well, throughout this slide, you'll be able to learn more about me and recognize some of the strategies and tools that I'm going to use to better help me to be an effective communicator. Next slide. So, in enlarging the conversation, which is so important, because enlarging the conversation, the definition is enlarging the conversation is a term that applies to a concept meaning, essentially understanding and listening and speaking or responding from the perspective that is larger than your own. So how does understanding my behavioral blend contribute to me enlarging a conversation? That's one of the questions that I ask myself. How can I use my behavioral blend to enlarge conversation? So enlarging conversation means that I'm going to take it a step further. And I'm ready to show you guys how I'm going to do that. Next slide. Well, this is my family. So I want to give you a brief background of the Grantling family. This is my husband, Eddie, of whom I love dearly. We've been married going on 18 years, and it has been a wonderful experience. I have a son, Eddie. He is my only son. He is 13 years old, going to high school this year. And even with my children, I have to learn to communicate effectively. My daughters, Madison and Morgan, they're twins, and they are 12 years old. And having this course really helped me to identify some areas that I need to work on in communicating as a wife and as a mother. I am an African American. My educational level, I have an associate's degree in child development. I have a bachelor's degree in special education from Eastern Michigan University. My current career is an educator. I just turned 40 this year, and it was a really scary, exciting experience for me. My family's communication style. Unfortunately, my family communicate through a lot of conflict. Not my my own family here, but my immediate family. So I wanted this course to teach me how to be a better communicator to my family so that I can teach them to communicate effectively as well. So I really allowed this course to minister to my soul, to say the least, because I really didn't understand that I was communicating wrong. Next slide. So here is where I was like, Carbonell, I don't think so. I don't think that that is me that you're describing. I don't think that this personal profile really describes me, until I continued to read and I said, oh my goodness, this is me. And so this is the DISC Personal Profile Behavioral Blend. And the definition is, it's a compilation of 4 types of temperaments expressed within this structure. So the 4 temperaments are abbreviated by letters DICS, and they're used to describe our own unique personalities. So my personal blend was an I, inspiring. It was C, cautious. D, active and task oriented. So the DISC personal behavioral profile examines the pattern of 4 personality types within a person. It looks at how a person views, perceives themselves, and to be how they're perceived by others. The 4 areas related to being task oriented versus people oriented, and active versus passive. So when I took a look at my personal profile, it really helped me to enlarge conversation, because it talked about me being the type of person that there was a portion that said what is expected of me. And in that portion, it said that I was a person that was driven, that I worked well when I'm in leadership positions, and that I would do great as an entrepreneur. And that was exciting for me, because that is an area I would like to own my own business. I do thrive in a non-micromanaged environment. And so I was really shocked to see that portion. There were others that I was like, I don't think that's me. But it does state uniquely, does state that this is not 100%, but it was dead on in most areas describing me. Next slide. So the behavioral blend, some of the positives and negatives that it as how it described me. It described me as, on the positive side, being outgoing, strong, firm, conservative, enthusiastic, a smooth talker, competent. And as far as more of the negative sides, I didn't agree with it, but hey, it said I was cocky, that I was a risk taker, that I was perfectionist, that I was persistent and calculating. And I think that that is a great overview of how many of us could be described. So in the D portion here, the active and task oriented, that is very true, but it also means that I'm often fatigued. I try to do a lot in a short amount of time, and I do have a problem with multitasking. So this was a very, very interesting and eye-opening experience for me that I absolutely value, and I will continue to take with me throughout the rest of my life. Next slide. So the Uniquely You assessment identified my behavioral, the highest level was an I. And it said that I like this description. So it said, according to Uniquely You, You are more influencing, inspiring, interacting, interested in people, inducing, and impressive. You like to stand out and be popular. Your personality is often described as the best type, but can also be the most prideful and egotistical. I was like, whoa, that's not me. Um, you love to talk, that is me, and affect people with your multitude of words and stories. That is absolutely me. So I am best described once again as an ICD, inspiring, competent doer. But sometimes being a doer means that I'm doing more doing. I'm more active, but I'm not really listening. I'm trying to get through the conversation so that I can move on to the next task that I have to complete. So that doesn't necessarily make the receiver feel good. I now understand that. So the ICD type has a lot of strengths, and I consider myself strong. I do. Independent and caring. I get the job done, and but once again, when you're that type of person, um, it talked about the clashes that I would have with people who needed patience, who needed me to be more available to them and not always in a rush. So this behavioral blend assessment through Uniquely You really allowed me to open my eyes to my communication style. And I'm most definitely going to use this to be effective daily in my interactions with others. Next slide. Now, there are communication barriers. So, some of the communication barriers that I talked about, fatigue. Um, Stewart said that disclosing myself to others could be a barrier. Negative self-talk could be most definitely could be a barrier. Burley Allen talked about that, and having difficult conversations. I flee, avoid, and run from difficult conversations. Um, and Stewart, you know, said that there is a way that we can have those difficult conversations and be successful. Bias listening. I think that we're all guilty of that. And Burley Allen talked about not going into a conversation prejudging or already assessing the end of the conversation. So you're missing the meat of the conversation. You're missing meaningful connections, ways that you can enhance and enlarge that conversation, even though they're coming to you. Someone maybe come to you in regards to something you did wrong or something they're not happy with. There is a lesson to be learned through all communication with everyone you come in contact with. Next slide. So communication barriers continued. Some of the solutions that I came up with is to be an empathetic listener, using inhaling and exhaling tools that I learned, making meaningful connections through my communication, using positive nonverbal clues. So making eye contact, nodding my head, clarifying, and paraphrasing. Next slide. So my plan of action. My plan of action is to incorporate, to work on, to implement, to use, and practice. And so I want to incorporate the strategies that I've learned through this course in my daily interactions. I also want to work on time management goals so that I have enough time to effectively listen and be more involved in the conversation. That would take place on my job as well as at home with my children. I want to implement the talker listener card process through Peterson. I thought that that was absolutely brilliant, and that is a process that I would like to incorporate. So within this process, it tells you when you're the talker and when you're the listener, and you don't get more direct than that. I think that that would be useful for me. what do I want to use? The results of Carbonell's DISC personality type assessment. I will use that to critically assess myself, see things that I need to change about me, and so that I can be a better person. I want God's love to exude from me. And so, in order to do that, I'm going to use these tools. And then I'm going to practice. Practice makes perfect. So, I want to practice at being a level 1 listener. Per Burley Allen, level 1 listeners are empathetic listeners. They make meaningful conversations, and that's what I want to do. That's what I want to strive to do. Next slide. So, in conclusion, my prayer is that through any course that I've taken throughout my life, even the course here at Liberty, the interpersonal communications, that I listen beyond my ears, but listen with my heart. And so I want to be an effective listener so that I can correct some of the behaviors within my family, because we tend to talk over each other during conflict. Maybe hash out some of the conflicts within my family. So I really want to use the tools and strategies within this course to be effective within my family, with strangers that I meet. I want God's love to exude from me, and I pray. I'm going to be prayerful that everything that I've read, every lesson that I've learned, every tool that I can be effective in implementing those tools in my life. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I am excited and ready to be an effective communicator. Have a great day.